What should Cardiff City do? Do they have an Erol Bulut problem? Do they need revolution after the Erol Bulut? That's what we're talking about on the video today, because there's been plenty of reporting over the last few days that Erol Bulut is in the last chance saloon at Cardiff City. I'm going to explain why I think moving Bulut on would be the right decision to make for Cardiff. George is going to talk about why they as a club shouldn't be focusing so much on the manager, but should be re-evaluating everything. Loads to get into on this video. We're on a mission to bring quality, detailed EFL discussion to YouTube. So please, if you'd like to support that mission, like, subscribe, comment, you know the rest. George, Cardiff are bottom of the championship after 5 games. They've got 1 point and they've got a -10 goal difference. How bad is it?
It's pretty bad. I mean, certainly the start of the season has been completely different to what the quite optimistic Cardiff fans expected in the summer. I would add a layer to this, which is that I'm not convinced necessarily that the performances themselves have been quite as bad as the scorelines and as the points tally and as the aggregate scoreline would suggest, where there have been games where they've missed chances at crucial moments. There have been games where they have basically conceded with every shot taken against them. Certainly the 5-0 defeat against Burnley was by nowhere near as bad a performance as we've seen. But as can often happen after a poor start to the season, performances can start to slip as they go, as players lose confidence, as managers try and chop and change things that maybe didn't need changing. And certainly the 1-0 defeat away at Derby last time, where even despite going down relatively early, it wasn't until the last 10-15 minutes or so that Cardiff looked in any way dangerous, and even then they struggled to create anything of note, was probably the performance that really signifies that things aren't well. That, the one thing I would say that has changed maybe, and what is not good for Erol Bulut, is that the expectation levels amongst Cardiff fans was very high. The perception was that the squad was very good. The perception was that after a mid-table finish last season, they would be able to kick on. I personally think, and the underlying numbers suggest that last season, Cardiff's finish maybe flattered them in terms of their actual performances as the season went on. And I'm also not convinced that the team or the squad is necessarily as good as the perception was that it was itself. So those are two aspects I think have to be taken into consideration within this wider conversation around Cardiff City and the manager.
Yeah, I'd like to focus on the manager. It's really difficult to be a football manager, and it can be quite difficult to analyse a football manager's performance because there's a lot of different aspects to football management that might go into the context of an individual at an individual club. It's very, very rare that I have an opinion as strong as I do about Erol Bulut, and I'm afraid it's not a positive one. I'm not someone that feels comfortable calling for a manager to be sacked, to be honest. What I would like to explain is why I don't believe he is doing or really has done a good job at Cardiff, and I guess why I think the club could do better. They finished 12th last season, as you alluded to, 12 points above the relegation zone and 11 points below the playoffs. The results were very mid-table. When I break down what I think a manager can do well, the sort of impact that they can have, it's a variety of things that are both on pitch and off pitch. So let's go through some of them. Tactically, style of play. 2 factors to style of play. One, is it a good watching Cardiff under Erol Bulut? I would say no, and I would say it hasn't been at any point, even really when results were good. Last season, they scored 25 goals in open play per FBref in 46 games, the fewest in the league. They conceded 56 open play goals, so 31 more goals conceded from open play than they scored. That is not football that's good to watch. Is it solid defensively? Sometimes football can be poor to watch, but you have to kind of agree with the fact that it's just effective. I don't think this was particularly effective. Cardiff conceded 70 goals last season in 46 games. Only 3 teams conceded more. So it wasn't like they were grinding it out by being really solid defensively and nicking the odd goal here and there. Does the tactical setup give the team a platform to win? Does it make the team look more than the sum of its parts? This is when you might look at a squad that doesn't stand out to you as being really strong, but the team itself is playing above its station, above the quality of the squad on paper as you perceive it. Are they tactically focused and effective within the framework that the manager is providing? No, not really. I genuinely don't think I've ever really felt that with Bulut's Cardiff. So how did they finish 12th? This is really simplistic, but this is really crucial for me. Last season, they had the best set-piece record in the Championship. And that might sound frivolous, but it counted for a lot when it came to Cardiff. Their plus 10 goal difference just from set pieces was massive for them. It turned a lot of games where they were poor, that could have been draws or defeats, into wins or draws. They scored 17 goals from corners, which is absolutely incredible. They had the third fewest corners in the whole league last season, but they scored 5 more goals from corners than anyone else. I've never really seen anything like it, to be honest, and it's amazing. It should be praised and it should be celebrated, except that this season they haven't scored any goals from corners. So far, the evidence suggests that hasn't carried over from last season. So that suggests to me it's not something particularly special that Erol Bulut was bringing to the table. And in any case, even if he was a set-piece specialist, no modern football manager can build a successful career just on being a set-piece specialist. That is a role in itself now, a specialist coaching role. Then I'm looking at development of players. And these don't have to be young players. And that's just as well, because Bulut doesn't really play any young players with any great consistency. This season, the 11 players that have started 3 games or more are all between 26 and 30. These are peak age players. Do they play like a peak age squad that are all in their prime and basically at their best possible performance level? I would not say so. What players can I think of that have played really well consistently under Bulut? Mark McGuinness, who got himself a big move to Luton off the back of it, and I guess Perry and G, who, in fairness, has played well consistently for every manager he's ever played under. He's just a good, consistent football player. There hasn't been any commitment really to develop young players, and that might not come down to Bulut. The club might have said to him, we're not fussed about that. But it's still something that you look for when you're looking for, reasons to admire the job that a manager is doing. I don't see there being any players that I would think he has obviously coached a lot of improvement in. And that's a two-way street. You need talent to want to work. But for some managers, it seems to come more naturally than for others. And then lastly, what I would call vibes management. Like, also known as, is this guy an inspirational leader? Is he a good face for the club? Does he represent the club well? Does he inspire the fan base? I don't think so. Bulut started with 2 massive derby wins against Swansea City and Bristol City. They won those games and they deserved to win them, and they got a lot of credit from that. And he got a lot of credit in the bank really early. And I think that carried him through what was a really big drop-off in the second half of last season. And it probably meant that the approval rating was higher than it would ordinarily be for the team playing as it was. But those are well in the past now, and they haven't been sustained. Since then, for me anyway, it feels like he's a guy that moans a lot. He's quite negative in his press conferences, in the way that he talks about his team, in the way that he talks about his position. There was quite a big new contract wrangling, a battle that he won, getting a new contract in the summer. Now, I wouldn't criticize people's personality. That is kind of inherent. I also accept that he's not a native English speaker and it's difficult living abroad, speaking and expressing yourself in a second language. But overall, I don't think there's been a huge amount to inspire the Cardiff fans ever since those derby wins. And frankly, when I think of Cardiff, George, and I look back at the last 5-6 years, basically post-Neil Warnock taking them to the promised land, it feels like it's been quite a long time since Cardiff have had a manager to really inspire them, either, frankly, as a personality or as a coach.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's where I think this conversation heads, where I'm seeing a lot of, as I tweeted this morning, I've been on the Cardiff forum this morning to have a look at what people are saying. And there seems to be this perception that Erol Bulut is the problem and that the squad is capable and that if they got in a manager who was better than Bulut, then they will be fine and they will be a mid-table club at the very least in the Championship. And I am not convinced that that's true. I think if you look at their squad right now, and you take the kind of teams that they need to emulate. So I'm looking at probably Coventry as an example, a team who not that long ago were fighting at the bottom end of the Championship, who have developed into a side that are, albeit having had a great start to this season, at the right end of the Championship with genuine potential to get back into the Premier League. How many players in Cardiff squad do you think Mark Robins would be like, yeah, I'll have him? Very few, I would say. Very few. And G is possibly one. I think of the new signings. I know there's been positivity around Kanga, but we're yet to see anything to suggest that it's justified. I know that Aaron Ramsey's someone who's got obviously a big reputation. I think Ruben Colwell's someone who has the potential, of course. But like right now, who would a club trying to get into the top 6 of the Championship want? I don't think there are very many. And I know there'll be Cardiff fans watching this saying that's not true. And that is completely fair enough. But as a neutral from the outside, analysing your squad, I don't think there are very many where that applies. And that is an issue. And I think that there is a complacency if you think, and I'm not saying that I disagree with you, the Bulut should be sacked.
You are allowed to.
No, but I don't think I do. Like I personally think that, as you say, they've been pretty poor for the majority of his reign. It's also interesting to note they've only drawn 7 games of the 57 that he's been in charge. My hunch is that if he was to manage another 100, they would draw a lot of games. That would probably come out of the W column rather than the L column, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So, if you look back at Cardiff's managerial hires, it is fairly desperate. Where if you look back at managers dating back to 15 years or so, the only manager that I can see that they've appointed who has like tangible recent success and a bit of a vision to buy into at the time of hiring him, ignoring people like Warnock and McCarthy, who've obviously had decades worth of it, is Neil Harris. And they hired Neil Harris after he left Millwall. And Neil Harris took them to 5th in the Championship, into the playoffs where they lost to Fulham. And he was sacked after a disappointing spell in the second season. But even so, at least they hired someone with a recent overperformance who'd taken a club out of the league below. And for a period of time, he made them a successful side. Since then, they've hired Steve Morrison, which was just a massive roll of the dice, basically, on an ex-pro with no managerial experience. They hired Mark Hudson for a very short spell, basically as a glorified caretaker, which again was just let's see if this really important player for us can do it as a manager. And after a short period of time, they decided that he hadn't. Sabri Lamucci came in again as like a glorified caretaker who'd had a short period of success at Forest that actually didn't come to anything because the underlying numbers caught up with them and it ended up not even qualifying for the playoffs. And then Erol Bulut, who's had a career in Turkey where he's jumped from club to club with moments of success but never really achieving anything. It feels so obvious that they're basically, it's such a scattergun approach of being like, maybe it's him. Like, let's hire him and we'll find out. And if it's not, then we'll try someone else. Where they've got to go after someone with a clear vision and a clear idea. Like you look at someone like a Carlos Corberán, where it takes time for his ideas and his work ethic and his relationship with players to flourish into something, but at least you know now that it exists. Going after someone and buying into their vision entirely and understanding that it's not just a case of like, here's a good set of players, go and work with them, and if you're not good enough, then we're going to sack you. That's just not a very conducive way to work. So I think my message would be, off the back of this, to Cardiff fans, is don't expect a new manager to come in and then judge him purely by results between now and the end of the season. And if he doesn't achieve your perception of what is acceptable, then he's therefore a failure and a bad manager. Because I don't think it's fair. I think there are way bigger issues at Cardiff City around strategy and squad building that are the crux of why they're underachieving. So, the underlying numbers are one thing, and the fact that they're not quite as bad as the results probably means that whoever comes in might enjoy themselves a nice little bounce, because if
quite a tough fixture list to start with.
But maybe as you say, maybe the idea is keep Erol Bulut in just to have to live through this tough run of weeks, and then they'll bring in someone when the fixtures get a bit easier. But all I mean is that I don't think sacking him, I'm sorry to do this, is going to be the golden bullet.
Silver bullet, golden bullet,
both.
The man with the golden gun.
The bronze bullet.
Really, really interesting. I agree wholeheartedly with what you say about Cardiff City and their strategy. I think that two things are basically true. Finishing this off, personally, I think it's worth seeing if they can hire a better manager than Erol Bulut, but I don't fully believe in their ability to do so. Cardiff fans, what do you think? How are you feeling? You've had all these managers over the last few years. The team has largely been underwhelming in that period. So what is the potential of this team this season? How likely is it that someone can come in and be the silver bullet and take this team into what's realistic? Top half? Is that exciting for you? Is that exciting enough? Do you think there's a chance of top 6, or is that just ridiculous to suggest? I think even within the fan base, some of you will see things differently. So let us know what you think and what you think about what we've said on the video today. And if you've enjoyed this and you want to see more like it, subscribe to our channel. Cheers.